Want to know exactly where you shouldn't live in Washington State? Well, today we are looking at Money Inc.'s top 5 worst places to live in Washington State. So if you want to know what they say and where you shouldn't land or stick around, we're getting after it right now. Hi, my name is Austin. Chris, myself, and our team help people move from all across the country to Washington every single day. If you're looking to make your move here in the next 9 days or even 90 days, shoot us a phone call, text, email, or even better, book a Zoom call with us so we can help you make a smooth move. And if you want to know everything going on right here in the Washington State market, hit that subscribe button. All right, number 5, we're going to take a close look at Parkland, Washington, a spot that's been making headlines for all the wrong reasons. According to a recent report from Fox News, based on data from a place called Road Snacks, Parkland ranks near the bottom as one of the worst places to live in Washington State. And unfortunately, AARP backs this up with a livability score of just 50. Not exactly a glowing review from the AARP. So what was one of the biggest red flags? Well, one thing that popped out was the cost of living index sits at 122.7, which surprisingly is high for a small city like this, at least at first glance. Honestly though, when I looked into the data, this was only about 23% higher than the national average cost of living. In fact, if I take a look really into the greater Tacoma area, this spot really isn't that expensive. But then again, I guess when you add in the limited job opportunities this article brings up, the low wages it discusses, it doesn't really paint a great picture for anyone who's thinking about relocating to Parkland. In terms of lifestyle, Parkland's walkability and bike scores are also really far on the low end, sitting at 36 and 40 respectively. And unfortunately, the crime rate is higher than I think probably anybody would want, which I guess makes this a tough sell for families or anyone looking for long-term stability. Chris and I, we actually had one of our first offices in Parkland. What we did was we rented out a 2-bedroom condo and we worked out of there for a little over a year. We often found ourselves at the 2121 pub in the area, and people were, they were honestly really always friendly and kind. Not to mention sneaking out, hitting up Angela's for an absolutely incredible breakfast. And then again, homes in Parkland also average about $413,000, which looks like a lot, but in perspective, it's about half of the price of a home for anywhere in the greater Seattle, Tacoma, Bellevue area. Coming in at number 4. All right, let's talk about Banbridge Island. If you're considering a move to Washington, you've probably come across this place. And while it might look like just the most absolute picture-perfect living from the outside, living there might not be for everyone. And so here's the deal. Banbridge Island doesn't exactly attract big crowds, and the population does reflect that. If you're dreaming of some kind of quiet, the grid lifestyle, away from the hustle and bustle of the city of Seattle, this actually could be your spot. And I'm gonna tell you, this article does give credit where credit is due in the fact that it talks about how Banbridge Island does have some of the best schools in the state. Families, you guys can count on a solid education here, and that is absolutely a huge plus. But even with that, the overall livability score was just at 53. And why is that? Well, the island's charm comes with a trade-off: the commute. Chances are you've got a job across the water in Seattle or someone else, and you're gonna have to be prepared to spend a good chunk of time on the ferry. And missing that ferry, yeah, it's gonna be ideal. There's not a lot to do to keep you entertained, and according to Money Inc., another thing to keep in mind is the walkability. More or less, they basically said it's non-existent. And unless you're working from home, jobs on the island are really slim. So for most people, the daily routine means catching the ferry to the mainland. It's not exactly convenient. And it can feel a bit isolating if you're someone who likes a little more energy and activity in your day-to-day life. Now, I've personally loved these islands. I've often contemplated, could I make a living on the San Juan Islands doing work? Joke's always on me because I'm pretty sure there is no way in hell could imagine myself selling enough real estate there. And the same thing kind of comes with Vashon Island. I love that one as well. These islands are incredible little communities. To me, they remind me of little like Hallmark movies. But I do get where this report is coming from. You know, short of working on the island, the commute would be brutal, and also those ferries are really expensive. And as far as home on Banbridge Island, this could be another reason why it made this list. Homes out there on the island, they are wild expensive. The average home comes in at around 1.4 million, and that's compared to the 800K average of the area. All right, rocking number 3 on the list of the worst places to live in Washington is Bremerton. Now, Bremerton is home of the historical naval shipyards, once known as a fun and thriving place to live. I mean, one of my favorite bands, MXPX, came from Bremerton. But according to this, the times have changed. According to Road Snacks, Bremerton doesn't get a great review, largely due to its crime, which is kind of surprising. And you want to know how bad it is? Well, Bremerton is actually considered more dangerous than 92% of neighborhoods across the entire country. Dang, that's literally wild. With crime rates this high, it ranks in the bottom 20% of all cities in Washington, obviously. I read this and I'm kind of a little floored, guys. I have done plenty of deals in Bremerton. Chris and I are always up there, it seems like. Actually, Chris is actually next door right now, working on a contract for a house in Bremerton. And I've got to tell you, personally, I've never felt unsafe. Now that is just one man's opinion, but 92% more? Wow, that's wild. Now let's talk about lifestyle. If you're planning on commuting over to Seattle, the ferry ride might sound charming at first, but it will wear on you quickly. You notice that trend with the ferries in this, right? For families keeping kids entertained here, and the schools, well, they scored around a 7 out of 10 on average. Not terrible, but not exactly top tier either. And this is something that I always look at for our clients. I decided to take a second look at niche.com to compare this to this report. And on niche.com, they gave them a C+ overall. And I did find one little fact that was a bit alarming. Their graduation rate is only 65%. While walkability is decent, bikeability is a struggle, and public transportation options in Bremerton are kind of limited. So the big question is, what makes people stay? Is it the small town vibe? Is it the affordability? Maybe it's the proximity to the water. Let me know actually down in the comments if Bremerton would be on your list or not. I can't imagine it being in the top 5 worst. Like I said, we've done a lot of deals, and housing affordability is so much better in this area than a lot of other spots. Number 2, the runner-up for the worst city in Washington. And I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I am calling BS on this one. Number 2 is Port Orchard. Let's see what Money Inc. had to say for themselves to justify this one. They said Port Orchard scored so low that it made them feel sorry for the residents and confident that this is one of the worst places to live in Washington state. Continuing on, they said this is a small town that is in a serious economic crisis. And while there are houses available in Port Orchard, no one wants to live there. Okay, again, I'm gonna stop right there. We have a lot of people who want to live in Port Orchard, especially from right here, our YouTube channel. People move from across the country, and what they're looking for always seems to be close to something like, hey, I want to be around the water and I want to be a short drive to the mountains. Well, Port Orchard is one of the most economical solutions to this. The average home is just $574,000. This is so much more affordable than almost any market that I can think of that's going to have these things for you here in Washington. All right, so let's go back to these guys here. They said one shining light is the school system, which does average an 8 out of 10, and that's better than many other cities further down this list. However, Port Orchard joins Bremerton in the top 20% of the cities because of its skyrocketing unemployment rates, vacant housing, and crime rate. Its 50 livability ranking from AARP and 121 cost of living index say it all, according to them. There isn't much that is exciting about Port Orchard. You get to pay more than average to live in a crime-ridden city. Nobody signed up for that. Okay, so pay more than average nationally? Sure, I'm gonna give you that. In Washington, not so much. I will tell you there isn't a lot to do in Port Orchard, but if you want a town, food, breweries, and fantastic people, I'm going to say I still think this is actually a really solid spot. Okay, I cannot wait to look at number one. Break. Is ending up in the wrong city in Washington something that scares you? I don't doubt it. I know when I packed up my family of 7, I was terrified about where to root my wife and kids. Let's make sure this doesn't happen to you. Shoot us a call, text, email, or book a Zoom call with us so that we can make sure that you make the right move. Here we go. Number one of the worst places to live in all of Washington State, the most despicable place in the Northwest. Port Angeles? Okay. Well, let's dive into their reasonings here. What they said was, don't let the 61 livability ranking from AARP or the reasonable 102 cost of living index point surprise you. Port Angeles tops our list of the worst places to live in Washington State. Port Angeles is a small college town that kind of sprang up in the middle of nowhere. You must take a ferry to get basically around the area, which makes it a terrible commute to pretty much anywhere. Furthermore, the crime rate is worse than 89% of the nation, and the walkability score is mediocre. They continue to say the unemployment rate is high, and so is the crime rate. Like Port Orchard, there's a lot of vacant housing here. Granted, the schools get 8 out of 10 from great schools, but you and your kids deserve better. Oof, those are some tough words. Wow, shots fired. This was kind of out of our service market, but it is the biggest city on the peninsula. It does have a really cute downtown with plenty of local shopping, and not to mention, for someone who loves the outdoors, over 1 million acres of national parks to take advantage of. I mean, Olympic National Park is right there, and it's magical. I can see when you look on the map, there isn't a lot around, so maybe people are viewing that as kind of a big negative. But let me ask you, what do you think? Do you think that this is actually the worst place to live in all of Washington? Let me know down in the comments. So there it is, the worst places to live in Washington State. Obviously, you can tell that I don't agree, but we all have our own unique perspectives after all. I just want to make sure that I help you land in the right spot for you and your family.